Dear students, welcome back. Let us continue the Linux system case study. In that, the last topic is file system. We all know that the file system is an integral part of any operating system because in the computer system, everything will be stored in the form of a file only. So, file system is providing a way to organize the files properly. So, its main purpose is to access the files efficiently. It means whenever you want to access any particular file, it must be made available without any delay. So that is the main purpose of file system implementation. Now let us study about file system in Linux operating system. So the Linux operating system is deriving the file system structure and semantics from Unix. We know that Linux is basically called as a free form of Unix operating system. The structure and semantics of Unix file system has been uh, taken into Linux as well, but there is a slight change in the Linux operating system. In case of Linux, internally, the kernel is hiding implementation details of the file system and it manages multiple different file systems with the help of an abstract layer that is called as virtual file system. So, virtual file system concept is not exist in Unix, but in case of Linux, there is a virtual file system. So, with the help of virtual file system, it is possible to have multiple different type of file systems in the Linux. So Linux can have a variety of file systems. So that is implemented with help of an abstract layer or abstraction layer that is called as virtual file system. Actually, the Linux virtual file system is designed using object-oriented principles, and it is basically consisting of two major components. First one, a set of definition that define what file object is allowed to look like. So whatever the files we stored in the virtual file system on the Linux system, it will be treated as an object. So the different information related to the file will be maintained here in virtual file system. First one, inode object. So inode is basically a file identifier and it is unique for each and every file. We know that already. But in case of Linux, we call it as inode object. It is representing an individual file in the virtual file system. The second one is the file object. The file object structure represents the individual open file. So once the file is opened, that is indicated through an object that is called as file object. And another one is the file system object. It is basically called a super object. It is representing the entire file system. You know that in Linux, because of virtual file system VFS, it is possible to have multiple different types of file systems, and every file system that is exists in the Linux operating system must be treated as an object that is called as file system object. Next one, a dentry object represents an individual directory entry. We know that files are organized into a directory or folder. An entry in the directory is basically an object representing a file, so that is stored in that particular directory. Now let us look at the Linux ext2 file system. If you look at today's Linux system, it is supporting ext2 and also ext3. Now let us look at what is Linux ext2 file system. So the ext2 file system that is used in Linux, it is almost similar to BST FFS. FFS stands for fast file system that is exist in BST Unix. So ext2 file system has been derived from BSD fast file systems, and it is used for locating data blocks that are belonging to a particular file. Now let us see what are the differences between ext2 file system and FFS with respect to their disk allocation policies. What is disk allocation? We know that disk is basically divided into a number of blocks, and if you want to store a particular file in the file system, then we need to allocate uh, a number of blocks from the disk to the file where actually the file will be residing. So in case of FFS, the disk is allocated to files in blocks of 8 KB. Usually the size of a block in case of FFS is 8 KB, and a blocks of 8 KB will be allocated to the files in case of FFS. And these blocks can be subdivided into fragments of 1 KB in order to store smaller files. To store the smaller files, 8 KB block will be divided into 1 KB smaller fragments, so which can be used to store small files. But in case of ext2, we don't make use of fragments. Here, the default block size of ext2 itself is 1 kilobyte, and also it is possible to have 2 KB or 4 KB blocks in ext2, but most of the time we'll have the block size of 1 KB. So it is very easy to store all different kinds of files. Files may be smaller, larger, doesn't matter. So we can store or we can allocate the blocks very easily in case of ext2 file system as compared to FFS. And the ext2 file system uses allocation policy designed to place logically adjacent blocks of a file system into physically adjacent blocks on the disk. The file that you want to store will be logically divided into blocks, that is called as logical blocks. Here we need to do mapping between logical blocks of the file with physical blocks of the disk. So block consisting of disk consisting of blocks so that are physically present, where actually we have to store the contents of the file. The file that you want to store in the disk will be logically divided into blocks. Now ext2 uses block allocation policy, so that is designed to place logically adjacent blocks. The logical file blocks which are adjacent to each other are put into physically adjacent blocks on the disk. So that is the block allocation policy adopted in ext2 file system. Now, what is the advantage of this particular policy? It can submit an IO request for a disk blocks as a single operation. So if you allocate the blocks in a contiguous manner and only with a single input output operation to the disk, it is very much easy to read or write the contents of the blocks or files. So that is the benefit we get in case of ext2 file system. Now let us see ext2 file system block allocation policy. So there can be two different approaches, as you can see in the diagram. First one, allocating scattered free blocks. In this particular diagram, so this gray filled area is indicating block in use, white area is indicating free block, and so this sign with the dot center is indicating the block selected by the allocator, and these arrow lines are indicating the bitmap search. So these smaller vertical lines are indicating bit boundary. So this thick vertical lines are indicating byte boundary. A byte consisting of 8 bit. So in this particular diagram, you can see we are allocating blocks, that is scattered free blocks we are allocating for the file. So the first block is here, and there is a link taken to the next free block here. So like this, the free blocks are scattered here. So in ext2 file system does not encourage this kind of allocation scheme because it will prefer the contiguous free block allocation. So as we can see in the second diagram, here the free blocks have been allocated in the contiguous manner. So what is the advantage of allocating the contiguous free blocks for the file here? The advantage is that with a single IO operation, we can perform a complete read or write operation. So that is the benefit we get out of contiguous free block allocation policy. Now let us look at another file system of Linux that is called as proc. So proc is a bit older file system as compared to ext2. It was present in older version of Linux, but in present Linux we'll find the ext2 and the ext3 file system. Now let us study about proc file system. Actually, the proc file system do not store the data. Instead, the file contents are computed on demand according to user file IO request. Proc is implementing a directory structure, and file contents are stored within the directory structure, and it must define a unique inode number for each directory. So that inode number is basically identifying contents of a file within the directory. And now let us see how that inode number can be used to perform IO operations on the file. So IO number is used to identify just what operation is required when a user tries to read from a particular file inode number or perform a lookup in a particular directory inode. When data is read from one of the file, proc collects the appropriate information, formats into text form, and places it into a requesting process read buffer. Now let us look at input output in case of Linux system. We know that Linux basically implementing a file system through object oriented approach, and it is maintaining two types of cache. So data is cached in the page cache, so which is a part of virtual memory system. We know that cache is basically providing the temporary storage for the data that is called as page cache. So that is part of virtual memory. So we discussed about virtual memory in the previous chapter. And metadata is cached in the buffer cache. So this is a separate cache which is maintained in the physical disk block. Page cache, where the data is residing, it will be part of virtual memory system, and the metadata will be buffered into a buffer cache or stored into buffer cache that is part of physical disk block. So Linux operating system split all devices into three classes, namely block devices, character devices, network devices. Now let us understand what is block device. So block devices allow random access to completely independent fixed size blocks of data. Here in case of block devices, the devices or the disk is divided into fixed size blocks of data, so which is suitable for random access. Second one, character devices. It is present in most of the devices. So in case of character devices, actually the data of a file will be stored in a contiguous manner byte wise. So bytes of file data will be stored in a contiguous manner. So byte of data is basically called as character data, hence they are called as character device. So character device is suitable for sequential access. So another kind of devices we can find here, that is network devices. We can have the network of the disk. So we learned about storage and network and all. So in this case, there is an interface using that we can have the kernel's networking subsystem to have the network of different storage devices. Now let us look at block devices in detail. So block devices provide the main interface to all the disk devices in a system, and there is a block buffer cache present in the system. So that serves the two main purposes. So block buffer cache is acting as a pool of buffers for an active I/O, and also it is serving as cache for completed I/O. The I/O operations which are presently active, for that this buffer cache is used, and also the I/O operations which are completed, for that purpose also we use the block buffer cache. In case of character devices, a device driver which does not offer random access to fixed block of data. Character devices doesn't support for random access. Basically, they are meant for sequential access. Character device driver must register a set of functions which implements the driver's various I/O operations. Now let us move to the next topic, that is inter-process communication. So in short, we call it as IPC. In the computer system, basically the sharing of resources is available. The resources are limited, and in the multi-programming system there are multiple processes running simultaneously, and whatever the resources the system is having, the resources must be shared. So in order to have the shared resource in the system, the processes must be properly synchronized. For that, there must be the necessity of communication happening between the processes, that is called as inter-process communication within the system. We already learned in the very first module that inter-process communication, in short we call it as IPC, can be implemented in many ways using semaphore, shared memory. So there are different ways to implement inter-process communication, where actually two or more processes will be communicating to each other. The possible methods include message passing, semaphore, and shared memory. Now let us see how the inter-process communication happens in case of Linux operating system. The IPC in Linux system will be same as that of Unix, where they will make use of signals. What is signal? Signal is basically a software interrupt, so which is sent to the process to give information about some event that has happened in the system. So that is how we can make use of signals. But the problem is that in Linux or Unix there are only limited number of signals, and they cannot carry information. Only they give a notification about the event that are happening, but signals doesn't carry any sort of information. Only we can indicate a process that some event has occurred. But the Linux does not use signals to communicate with the processes. Instead of that, communication within the kernel is achieved with help of process scheduling states like waiting state, running state, idle state. So using process states, here the kernel is going to communicate with the processes. So that is how inter-process communication has been implemented in Linux. Now let us see how the data is passed between the processes, how data get transferred from one process to another process. So for that purpose we make use of a mechanism that is called as a pipe mechanism. So there will be a pipe created between the two communicating processes. So that pipe has got two ends. So one process will write the data to the pipe at one end, and other process will read the data, read the same data from other end of the pipe. So that is how two processes will be transferring messages or data with the help of a pipe mechanism. So in case of Linux system, the pipe mechanism allows the child process to inherit a communication channel to its parent. The pipe itself is a communication channel. Even it can be implemented as a FIFO pipe, first in, first out pipe. So the data or the message which is returned first to the pipe will be delivered to the other end first. So that is called as first in, first out pipe. So initially, child process will be inheriting this kind of communication channel from its parent, and the data returned to one end of the pipe, and which can be read by other end by the other process. So that is how two processes will be sharing the or passing the data with the help of pipe. And also you know that using shared memory we can achieve the communication. What is the benefit of using shared memory? Shared memory basically offers an extremely fast way of communication. So in the physical memory itself, some portion of memory is shared among the processes. If at all the process wants to communicate what they do is, one process is going to write data to the shared memory, and the other process will read the data from the same memory. So even the communicating processes are in the physical memory, and shared memory is also in the physical memory. Hence, the communication happens at a very faster rate as compared to any other technique. So in this case, data written by one process to shared memory region and can read by other process immediately. Now let us look at the shared memory object. Actually, in case of Linux, shared memory is implemented as an object because Linux is using object-oriented approach. The shared memory object acts as a backing storage for shared memory region. It is same as backing store for memory mapped memory region. Shared memory mappings direct page faults to map in pages from persistent shared memory object. Shared memory objects remember their contents even if no processes are currently mapping them into virtual memory. So this is the end of Linux file system. Thank you.